Hi everybody! Well, it was such a beautiful day in Southern California. I thought, why not come out to the park to read? And it is beautiful. Took the dog for a walk. He's laying over there and looking at everything. So if I suddenly get yanked off camera, it's because he's gone after a squirrel. But yeah, just really pretty, quiet day in the park. It's really nice. Well, let's get started, right? I am Aunt Dada, and I'm reading The Rat Father. Da, 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 da. And we are at chapter 3, A Dance Without Wings. Are you ready to get started? The geese dropped us off near the rain gutter of our house, but Ray and the twins weren't ready to end their day. I was itching to get back to the urn and start assembling the shards from the nest. They begged me to come along for the little air show they were going to put on, and I said no with a smile. I waved at their departing figures as the twins rode into the sky with Ray clutching Elwood's neck. When I turned, Tumble grabbed my shoulders to keep me from plowing into him. "Watch yourself, Bern," he chuckled. "You might run into trouble." I jerked away. Yeah, I never know what I might fall over around here. I tried to stand in front of my bag, but Ruff beat me to it. "What's this?" Ruff held the bag over my head and jostled it. "It's mine!" I leapt for it. He turned away and I flew right past him. I landed in a heap next to the wall. He upended the bag and all my precious shards came tumbling out. He kicked the pile. "What's all this then?" he asked me. "It ain't food. Why have you got it?" I clenched my paws. "Look, it's mine, okay? And no, you can't eat it." I snatched a shard from Tumble's claws. He had just begun to nibble the edges of it. He spat. "Ugh! It tastes like old socks," he told me. Ruff turned his muzzle to me. "What you got brewing in that little head of yours, I confessed. "I'm building an urn with it. Are you happy now?" Ruff tapped his bottom lip with a foreclaw. "Are we talking arts and crafts here?" I guess so," I answered. Ruff nodded once, then picked me up and slammed me into the wall. He pointed his claw in my face and said, "You make your little art projects if you like, but if next week's pickup is light again, I'll smash your little urn into a million pieces." I gasped, "No!" Ruff smiled. "I could always smash your head instead. Your choice." I asked, "Is there a third choice?" He leaned in close and said, "Yeah, dig through the trash like your life depends on it. 'Cause it does." It's hard to be brave with my paws dangling in the air, but I asked anyway. "Why the increase? We used to barely be able to make the old take. Now it's near impossible. What happened?" Tumble smiled. "We need it for the party." "Party?" I thought. Ruff pointed at him. "You shut up." He pointed at me. "Both of you, shut up." He dropped me onto the ground. After dusting himself off, he batted Tumble in the leg and motioned for them to go. Tumble gave me his usual cheery wave as they walked away. I rolled off my head, which I had landed on, and began scraping my shards back in the bag. I heard Patches before I saw him. "Have they gone?" he asked. "I hope so," I answered. "Look, what do you want? I'm kind of busy." I turned a circle to make sure I'd grabbed all the shards that had fallen. Patches looked up. "I didn't say I want nothing," he said. He peered at me in case I attacked him. I knew a lot of other rats would kick and spit at him. They weren't mean, really. It was just... Patches was a problem for everyone. Smart rats stayed out of sight. They nibbled around the edges, and they did not invade homes or bring similar human attention to themselves. Not the smart ones anyway. And here comes Patches, with his big lumbering self. He would actually approach a human to beg. I'd seen it before, and I'd seen him narrowly avoid being beaten to death by a shoe wielded by a frightened mother. "What do you want, Patches?" I asked. He scratched his butt thoughtfully before answering. "I was wondering if I could stay with you and Ray for a bit." I held up my paw to stop him. No. No way would Ray go for that. "I thought you found a place. You told me 3 days ago you found a great place." He shrugged. "Flooded." I smacked my forehead with the heel of my forepaw. What were you staying in?" "A shoebox," he answered. "Oh, for goodness sake. That is made of paper. I swear I could smack you sometimes," I thundered. He cringed away and I felt instantly bad about my outburst. His ears were all tatty and bloody. He was being beaten up again, but there was no way he could stay with us, and I knew it. Ray would go nuts. Besides, Patches smelled. And it wasn't always the same smell. His odor fluctuated with his diet. I was okay living with him, but not the smell that came with him. I tried to think of a way to help without having him move in. Look, how about you stay in this drain pipe tonight, I said, and we'll go look for your new place together tomorrow. We'll start fresh in the morning. He waggled his ears. That would be really great. I patted his shoulder and tried not to feel guilty for not liking him. He looked at me with his bright, shiny, little, needy eyes, and I felt disgusted by his weakness and angry at being stuck with helping him since no one else would. The general thought was that if rats like Patches died quickly on the street, it was better for everyone, including them. I knew that it was true in a brutal sense of the word, but did it have to be that way? And there was no hope for Patches. Why would there be any hope for me? I wasn't wild like Ray. I had a past. I had known a human once. The next morning, I watched Ray wing his way into the air on Elwood's back on his way to the tower to learn to dance. I shook my head. I thought he was nuts, but I often think my friends are crazy. It wasn't a new thing. I walked over to the drain pipe and kicked Patches in the back paw. Come on, get up, you. Time to find a new home. There was no reply. I reached over, grabbed his tail, and hauled him bodily out of the pipe. He didn't move the whole time. Nothing struck me as wrong until he bounced stiffly on the ground. His front claws were curled under, and his legs were rigid. My jaw hung open for a beat, and then I realized I had my tail in his paw. I dropped it with a shudder. Patches? I whispered. Again, no answer. His lips were pulled back over his teeth. Blue foam had dried in streaks over his muzzle. All I could think was he had got hungry late last night and went foraging for food. He couldn't wait, so he just ate what he found, and what he found was the peanut butter-flavored blue tabs the environmental health officers left out to poison us. I warned him, I whispered to myself. I dashed the tears from my face angrily. Stupid Patches. If he had just waited a few hours, I could have found him someplace safe. I stared at his body. I knew if I left him, he would be swept up with the trash in a few hours, and I couldn't stomach him being tossed away one more time by the world. I shoved him back in the drain pipe and ran to my workshop. I found a blue handkerchief covered in Union Jacks. I brought it back to the drain pipe and tied it gently around Patch's now empty body. It had stiffened overnight, and I had the devil of a time bending his legs against him. When he was mummified in the blue cloth, I rolled him onto the paw cart and drug him to the nearest wall overlooking the Thames. I removed my hat and tried to think of something to say to memorialize a defunct, now dead lab rat that had been a farty reminder of everything I did not want to become. Nothing came to mind. I sighed. Oh, great toothed one, if you're really out there, watch over old Patches. He deserved better. I patted what I thought was Patches' head before I rolled him over. He landed with a splash, bobbed for a moment, then sunk under the water. I watched the dark blue figure sink, then got caught in the undercurrent of the river and started its journey of being swept out to sea. Sleep well, my friend, I whispered. It wasn't much of a prayer, but it was all I had. I felt emptied out. Patches hadn't been a best friend. I only knew him for the past few months, but he was a dread reminder of what could have been for me if I hadn't learned fast and picked up the vibe of the streets. That could have been me drifting out to sea. That thought chilled my bones. I didn't tell Ray when he got home that night. He was so excited about his day that it seemed cruel to put that on him. And then, by the next day, there just didn't seem to be a time that I could bring it up. Hey, did you know Patches died less than a yard from our front door? Didn't really just roll off the tongue. So I held mine. Also, I wasn't sure what his reaction would be. It would hurt my feelings if he wasn't as torn up about it as I was. I don't know why, but it would have. Jake and Elwood became Ray's ride to the tower every morning. They would land in a tumble of feathers and honks of anger at each other's clumsiness. After their argument, we would eat, then Ray would hop onto Jake like a tiny cowboy, and they would depart with a war whoop and a volley of honking. I would spend the day working on the urn, assembling it bit by bit, turning shards this way and that until they looked right. I can't explain why they looked right, but at some point a shard would look perfect and I'd glue the sucker in. Other times I'd go poking around for food and sniff around for news about the local rats. A smart rat had to stay aware of who was working what territory. I've ended up in bad scrapes for whittling on someone else's corner. So I keep my ears up and nose down to stay safe. Every afternoon, Ray returned sweaty and worn out. He seemed happy at first. I noticed after a week his departure in the morning was less excited, and he was real quiet when he returned. It was a gray day when he decided to quit altogether. I thought the rain was the reason he drooped so much when he came in. I waved at him and returned to brushing lightly at the shard in my paw. I was so close to being done with the urn. A few more shards and it would be perfect. I watched him scuffle across the room. He ignored me and plopped onto his nest by the wall, curled into a ball and shivered. Then he pulled up a scrap of blanket over him and sniffed. I set the shard down and strolled over to the wall near him. I made a big show of rattling through my tools. He scrunched up tighter. I picked up a piece of wood and examined it. Ray stared at the wall. I sat on the edge of his nest and gnawed on the wood to wear down my incisors. I stared at the back of his ears. How did dance practice go? That well, huh? Ray balled up his blanket and threw it over my head. It's going terrible. I'm terrible. He turned back to the wall. I poked him with the wood I was gnawing on. Show me, I said. He uncurled from the bunk with a sigh and stomped to the middle of the room and did his dance. When he was done, he sat on the floor with his back to me, his head lowered. I think I see the problem, I said. I have 4 left feet, he shot back. No, I said, it's not your feet. They're fine, I paused. It's your wings. What wings, he said. He flapped his 4 legs about. Exactly, I said. These moves need wings. Watch. I picked up the blanket he had thrown and draped it over my shoulder. I repeated the steps, swirling the fabric with the moves. It looked silly on my stubby body, but the point was made. Ray threw up his paws. Great. I've got the wrong body. I said, don't be silly. You're a fine figure of a rat. He sniffed. Whatever. I snapped. Ray, you can either let me help you or you can let me get back to work. Ray turned around. Then go back to work. Fine, I said. I turned back to stomp to my workbench. Then a thought struck me. I turned back to him. When's the last time you had to work hard for anything? He turned to look at me. What's that supposed to mean? I asked again. You heard me. When was the last time you had to struggle? Ray looked at me with a wrinkled muzzle. He shrugged. I pointed at him and said, never. That's when. Never. You never had to fail a whole bunch of times before you got better, huh? He shrugged again. Well, no. I'm a rat. Being a rat just kind of came naturally to me. I clapped a paw over my eyes. Geez, Ray. You're not terrible. You're an amateur. And he looked at me in shock and then said, well, you're an old Allosaurus. I'm a what? I laughed. He shrugged again. I don't know. I just heard a kid at the park use that word. It sounded dirty, he answered. I sighed and said, Ray, it's a dinosaur. An amateur isn't an insult. It means beginner. It's what you are before you become an expert. And he asked, what makes you an expert? I answered, practice. Lots of it. I put a foreleg around his hunched shoulders. You have to start somewhere, buddy. You have to fall so you learn not to. It's a process, not a finished product, and you, buddy boy, are on the ground floor. He peered at me. So you're saying keep going? Yes, I answered, with a few modifications. He wrinkled his muzzle again. Why, Bern? I thought you thought I was stupid for doing this. That gave me a twinge of guilt. I replied, I did. And then I thought better. Thought better of what? He asked. I smiled. Of you. Ray smiled back. Thanks, Bern. I stood and smiled at him. Let's dance, buddy. We went over the steps Ray had learned so far. We tried making a cape from an old linen napkin. He flourished, he leapt, he spun, and worst of all, he looked awful doing it. I sighed and covered my eyes with a paw. After an hour, we stopped in frustration. Ray leaned his forepaws on his knees and panted, It's no good, Bern. I'm a mess. It doesn't look like dancing. It just looks like I'm going to be sick on myself. I tried not to laugh and failed. Ray looked offended for a moment, and then a grin spread from ear to ear. He shrugged it off. Hey, Bern, I figure if I'm going to be untalented, might as well be fabulously untalented. Superbly untalented, I corrected him. Award-winning untalented, he added. Oh, no, I said. If there was a Nobel Prize for untalented, you would be first in line. I fell down laughing. Ray stared at my kicking feet and said, okay, it's not funny anymore. I stood and dusted myself off. Sorry. Want to go on a trash run in the morning? Ruff and Tumble came by. Caper wants more stuff. I think they're throwing a party. Ray complained. They're probably going to make us steal crackers and cheese from Harrod's. Come on, I wheedled. I'll let you yell at the squirrels. Ray cracked a smile. Deal. The next morning, I found the perfect shard to finish Fleur's gift. I had just finished cementing it in and was standing on my back legs to admire my work when Ray woke. He stood up, stretched his back up like a cat. After shaking each leg a moment, he turned towards the urn. Hey, looks good, Bern, he said. I turned around. Really? You think she'll like it? I ran my paw around the upper lip of the vase. It was ruffled all the way around like a flower petal, and the seams were smooth. I was proud of it. I'd worked hard on it, and I couldn't believe it was actually done. I slapped Ray on the shoulder. You ready? He grinned. Of course, let's dig, brother. We grabbed our paw cart and trundled it to Green Park. We had to stop by Denari's on the way. Thursdays were trash day, and that meant a whirlwind of worldwide delights into his trash bin. We found hummus, my favorite, though to put it nicely, even flies stay away from me when I eat it. Ray found a hunk of lamb kebab that was almost as big as him. I laughed. We can't take that, it's too big. He pleaded, oh, come on. I told him, you can have half. It will go bad before you can eat it all anyway, I pointed out. How about I eat half now and we can take the rest with us, he wheedled. I ignored him and sawed it in half with my homemade hacksaw, a doll's comb with the teeth broken out, and a tightly braided line of wire from trash twist ties. I hung the saw back on my belt and tossed the hunk of meat into our cart. Ray gnawed frantically at the piece I left behind. I grabbed a bag of stale pita chips and nudged him. Let's go. He mumbled. I warned him. You're going to hurt yourself, man. A shadow fell over us both. We turned to find Ruff and Tumble smiling behind us. Ruff leaned forward and plucked half the kebab out of our cart. He took a large bite of it. Hello, boys. How's the trash game? Fine, I replied. Instead of saying it stinks, I was done supplying the punchline to Ruff's jokes. Nice one, Tumble said, out of habit. We all stared at him. He spread his paws. What? Ruff rolled his eyes and then looked at me. This looks like a nice haul. I love pita chips. Ray grabbed the chips from him and snapped. Yeah, we like 'em too. Ruff grabbed the chips back. Listen up, you thin streak of cat puke. None of this is your trash. It's ours. Every last bit. And if you ever snatch something from me again, I'll break you. I tried to insert myself between them. Look, guys, I started to say. Tumble grunted, then smacked me in the eye with his fist. Ray watched with his mouth hanging open. Ruff put a paw on Tumble's shoulder. Not now, biggin, he said. If he can't see, he can't find more trash. We need more from you. Caper is disappointed. I don't like that. When he's disappointed, I get mad, and when I get mad, other animals get hurt. Ray tried to help me stand up. He yelled, yeah? Well, we get hungry, and if we starve to death, you don't get anything. He snatched the chips back from Ruff. That's ours. You can't take it. That's not fair. Ruff poked his claw in Ray's chest and told him, no, it's not. A fair is something with pigs, pie contests, and a carnival. You're in the city, big boy. The only fair here is what the rat father tells you is fair. He put his gigantic paw over Ray's muzzle and shoved him to the ground. I was thankful Ray stayed down. Ruff leaned over and gingerly snapped the bag of chips from Ray again. Then Ruff crammed a whole paw full of chips into his mouth and chewed noisily as he walked away. Tumble gave us his usual cheery wave and wheeled away our paw cart, full of our food. Ray helped me up and dusted me off. What was that about? He asked. I sniffed. I told you they were getting meaner. Ray stared at my muzzle. Have they hit you before, Bern? I rubbed my eye. Well, they've thrown me around a bit, but they've never hit me. That was the first time. Thrown you around a bit, he said. What do you mean, thrown you around a bit? Why didn't you tell me? I sighed. I didn't want to worry you. I like where we live. I figured I could handle them. Ray shook his head. It's not right, them hitting you like that. You know that's wrong. It's not right, and it's not fair. I rolled my eyes. There you go again with the whole fair thing. A rat's life isn't fair, Ray. Ray snorted. Who told you it isn't fair? Ruff? You trust his opinion? I said, no one told me. It's what I know. Ray replied, maybe fair is the fair we make for ourselves. I waved a paw. Whatever. Is what happened to Patches? I did quotes with my air claws. Fair? I did air quotes with my front claws. Fair? Ray paused. Why? What happened to Patches? I clenched. This was not the moment I had wanted to tell him this. I sighed. He died a few days ago. He was poisoned. Ray's whiskers twitched in thought. He shook himself and said, that's really sad. I thought he was a complete goon, but I know you liked him. You were always slipping him food. I acted like I had no idea what he was talking about. He waved my denial away. I didn't care that you gave him food. Better old Patches have it than Caper and his boys. He looked around him. Well, we lost the cart. Let's blow off the rest of the day. Come on, let's go to the park. I'll see if I can find you some mushy melons. The park was alive with activity. Adults lounged, children played, and dogs smelled every available inch their leashes would let them get to. The squirrels were out in force. They flicked their tails and chirped at the picnickers on the grass. The squirrels would move in waves, covering the area, stripping it clean of food. Ray watched them while I dug in the park trash. I turned to hand him some apple wedges and saw he was gone. Ray, no! I shouted. He was striding away from me into the park, in full sight of everyone. I hissed and gestured for him to come back. He ignored me. I covered my face and peered between my paws as the nightmare unfolded. The squirrels saw him first. They tumbled over each other to reach the base of their poplar tree. They mumbled to each other. A rat in the park during the day, it was a scandal. They tugged on the furry tips of their ears and argued with each other what to do. Ray ignored them too. He reached a paved clearing near the middle of the park, raised his forelegs, and bopped his nose up and down 3 times. Oh, rats, I groaned. He got about halfway through his routine before one of the humans screamed. I knew he was doing this for food, but I don't think he expected to be pelted with the amount of food he got. He disappeared under the pile. I wiggled under the fence and ran to pull him free. I didn't notice the dark shadow that flew above me until I was halfway to Ray. Then I heard the squirrels screaming, Run for your hides! To the tree! Help! Falcon! Ray had his paws outstretched toward me. He was screaming. I couldn't hear him. All I could hear was my own heart beating. My tongue was too big for my mouth. My fur stood on end, and I felt the chill of the falcon's swift shadow as it covered me. My paw brushed Ray's, and then I felt the falcon's talons curl around me, drawing me upward. I tried to twist around to look upward at the bird. It tightened its claws until I felt my ribs creak. I struggled for my life. Every detail became sharp. I could see everything zipping along below me. I saw a bug-eyed squirrel wearing a beret. He ran to the end of a largest branch on the largest tree in the middle of the park. He bobbed his head a few times and then launched himself into thin air. A membrane between his front and back legs popped open, and he sailed straight to me. Hang on, mon petit ami, I have you, he yelled with a thick French accent. I squirmed to grab my file from my belt. I stabbed the falcon in the leg hard. It screamed and dropped me. The ground whistled toward my face and was replaced by brown fur as I crashed into the squirrel that jumped after me. He wrapped around me. We tumbled into a furry ball on the ground and broke apart when we hit the fence. We lay on the ground and gasped for air. Ray grabbed my foreleg and hauled me upright. The squirrel stood and shook his head to clear it and stuck out a paw. Bonjour, he said. I smiled weakly, turned away from his paw, and threw up on Ray. Nice. Real nice, Bern. The squirrel looked at his paws and said, Mon Dieu, you are bleeding, my friend. That's what was when I fainted. When I opened my eyes, I saw dark cloaked figures above me. They leaned in and I scooted back. There was a stone ceiling above me illuminated by flickering candles. The dark figures murmured. One washed my forehead with a cool cloth. Oh, Bern, how do you get into these scrapes? Fleur murmured. I smiled weakly and passed out again. When I came to, Hugin was fanning a steaming bowl of broth with the tips of her wings. She handed it to me. "Drink this, little rat. It will help you heal." I sipped it. She ran her wingtips over me, prodded my right hip. I hissed in pain. She nodded. "I see that hip is still tender. Did you know it was dislocated?" "How did you know about my hip?" I asked. She told me, "I found it when I was assessing your wounds. I've been studying chiropractic adjustment." She poked me again. "Chiropractic?" I grunted in pain. "Bone cracking," she replied. "An appropriate interest for a raven, I find." I shuddered and raised a paw. "Stop! I don't want to know." "Are you sure?" she said. "It's very interesting. I simply rolled your femur back into..." She raised her wingtips to demonstrate. "Oh, God, stop, please," I begged. Hugin looked disappointed, but the thought of my bones grinding under her talons made me shudder. "It's a rat thing." She prodded further. "It felt like an old wound. The fall must have shaken the joint loose, allowing it to be fixed." I felt ill. "Well, that's lucky then," I said weakly. "Who's your bug-eyed friend in the beret?" she asked. "The squirrel?" I said. "I'm not sure. Is he still here?" I tried to sit up, and Hugin pushed me back down. A voice echoed around us. "I am here, mon ami!" The squirrel in question leapt from a nearby column, curled around a low-hanging rope, did a few flips, and glided to a halt near us. His black beret tipped rakishly over one ear, and his striped fur formed a black pencil-thin mustache on his upper lip, which split into stripes that ran to the tip of his tail. He had various bandages and plasters stuck to his fur. He sniffed me, then clapped me on the arm. I grunted in pain. He told me, "My name is Daniel de Leon. Dan to my friends," he said. I sounded out his name. Dandelion? He waved his paws around. Oui, I know. My human is the French ambassador's 12-year-old daughter. She is obsessed with the color yellow. I feel lucky not to be named Buttercup. He poked me in the ribs. "Where did you learn to tuck and roll like that? You save you a broken limb, certainement." I blushed. "I was more adventurous when I was younger," I said. Ray stuck his head out a nearby pipe. "Oh, yeah? What kind of adventures?" I greeted my friend. "Well, hey, Ray! Did you get to keep any of that food your fans lobbed at you?" He had the courtesy to look embarrassed. "How was I supposed to know you'd get mauled by a falcon?" I said, "Yeah, right. I thought I'd taken care of being mauled today with Caper's boys." Ray demanded, "Don't change the subject. How did you hurt your hip the first time?" They all stared at me. I was too embarrassed to say. I started and stopped at least 3 times before blurting out the truth. "I was injured performing for humans. I was bought in a pet store." Ray took a step back. "You weren't born wild? You're domesticated? A welfare rat like Patches?" My head snapped up. "No, I'm nothing like Patches. I'm alive, for one thing." They stared at me. Ray turned away. Hugin asked, "Who's Patches?" I sighed, "Just some rat we knew. He ate poison PB tabs." I could see the mixed look of horror and disgust. Horror at dying so terribly, and disgust for being so stupid as to eat poison PB tabs in the first place. I wanted to defend him, but I couldn't. I resented feeling the need to defend him or myself. Hugin laid her wing on Ray's shoulder. "Does it matter Bern wasn't born wild?" she said. Ray looked at her, then back at me. "Well, no, not to me, but Caper better not find out. He takes that stuff seriously." Hugin tilted her head and said, "Well, I don't follow you. What does Caper have to do with Bern's origins?" Ray shrugged. "You hear rumors. I mean, nothing specific, but you just know. If you're a Hume rat, they'll pick you up and take you away." Hugin waved a wing. "Hume rat?" I explained. "Hume rat is slang for human-raised rat." She nodded. "And where do they take them?" Ray shrugged. "Who knows? They're just gone." Hugin looked upset. "No one asks where they go?" He answered her. "We don't ask, and Caper doesn't tell us." I'd heard things, disturbing things about what happened to Hume rats. It was the reason I had fed Patches in the first place, but I wasn't going to scare everybody with a bunch of gossip. Besides, sharing that side of inner-city rat life seemed too private, too painful, especially since I was a Hume rat. I could be considered, quote, a burden and removed by Caper's boys. I wasn't proud of it. I didn't agree with it, but I was just one rat with zero chance of changing it. Ray scratched his ear. I can't believe you're a human rat. You always made such a big deal about being a self-made rat. I didn't think you even liked humans. I furrowed my brow. I never said that. You never said you liked them, he pointed out. Well, I'm not the one performing for them, I shouted. See? He yelled back. Dan looked side to side, watching our argument like a referee. He held up a paw and said, I find that rarely do I like all of anything. Mostly I like a certain animal as opposed to the whole species. Bern, did you like a particular human? He asked me. I whispered, Albrecht. Ray said, what? I spoke louder. His name was Albrecht, and he was 8 when we met. Did you have fun? I hope that wasn't too long. I got about halfway through that and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a really long chapter. And it's been, there's been a lot of fires in Orange County, which we're kind of close to. So there's like actually ash drifting out of the sky here and there. And I was trying so hard not to cough. So I'm sorry I coughed during the reading. But tune in next week. Wednesday it'll be dropped. Chapter 4, Bern's story. So we'll hear Bern's origin story and hear about his human Albrecht. And maybe hear about how he hurt his leg. Depends. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed your chapter in the park. I don't know where I might record this next time. I might try to find some place cool, or I might do it in my backyard, or I might do it in my office. It just depends on what my mood is, because I get to do what I want. It's my book. Anyway, if you're listening to this to go to bed, sweet dreams. And if you're listening to this to critique, please leave comments. And if you want to read ahead, you can find The Rat Father on Amazon.com and Dada. You can do Kindle, or you can order a hard copy. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week for Bern's story, Chapter 4. Bye.